La Unión Europea se ha enfrentado en los últimos años a varias dificultades. Primero políticas y más recientemente de índole económica y política. Se han obligado a sus líderes a una reflexión y revisión profunda y responsable de sus mecanismos e instrumentos para que la misma sea una herramienta unificadora y fuente de crecimiento para sus miembros. En el día de hoy escucharemos a uno de sus líderes, protagonista del proceso de integración europea, que tiene ideas muy precisas de cómo marchar en el futuro para alcanzar los mejores resultados para todos los pueblos del continente europeo. Señor Presidente, es un honor y placer contar nuevamente en esta casa con su presencia y en nombre del Consejo Argentino para las Relaciones Internacionales le agradezco su visita y lo dejo en uso del piso de esta institución. Muchas gracias.
I remember my meeting here, but my being here 17 years ago, I was shocked to see my photo here. I looked differently at that time, which is probably something you don't know, but my experience is different. Thank you for the invitation. I don't want to make comments on that, but one thing must be mentioned. In one of the very first sentences, you said that the Czech Republic separated from Slovakia. I must say it's not true. Slovakia separated from the Czech Republic. And what I did was to make the separation friendly, smooth, rapid, but it's very important to make that distinction. It's one of the important points. As I am sure you know, I am here in Argentina on an official state visit, and I must say that we have had very productive and friendly talks with your president today, and my visit has a clear and understandable aim to promote the Czech-Argentinian relations. That's my ambition. I came also to better understand the developments in this country, in this part of the world, and to learn from it. Definitely I didn't come here to give any advice or recommendation. I don't believe in the role of foreign advisors. When we opened the country after the fall of communism, we eliminated all the entry visas, and I remember that I wanted to reintroduce the visas just for one specific group of people, for foreign advisors, because that's a group of people whose contribution to the health of nations, to use the Adam Smith term, is contribution is close to zero, if not negative. I think it's more often on the negative side. So please don't expect from me any advice. Let me, on the contrary, use this opportunity to say a few words about something I know better, about the continent from where I just came 22 hours ago, about Europe. The developments there bother me, and I don't see any reason to describe the current Europe in a propagandistic way, as is the role of ambassadors, you know, or using rosy colors or rosy glasses. Many of us in Europe are convinced that Europe faces a serious problem, which is not a short-term or medium-term business cycle phenomenon. It is not an integral part of a recent global crisis either. It is something very, very European. As an economist, I would call it a structural problem which will not by itself wither away. It used to look quite differently in the past. The post-World War II reconstruction in Europe was a success, and even in the following decades, Europe was growing, was peaceful and stable, and was relevant. I mean, relevant in the context of the whole world. What happened in Europe and with Europe? What went wrong? Why is Europe less successful and less relevant today? I am deeply convinced that it is a result of two interrelated phenomena. Of the European integration process on the one hand, and of the European economic and social system on the other. So the European integration model and the European economic and social system. So those are, in my understanding, the two reasons for the problems which exist in Europe these days. I will start with the first topic, because I repeatedly see that the people on other continents do not have a proper understanding of the European integration process, of its effects and consequences. It is partly because they do not care. Why do you care? In Argentina about Europe. And partly because they believe that a regional integration is, regardless of its form, style, methods and ambitions, an exclusively positive, progressive, politically correct development. They probably accept the conventional wisdom that the weakening of nation states and the strengthening of supranational institutions is a movement in the right direction. That's the assumption, probably. This view can be, in my understanding, explained only as the underestimation of what happened in Europe in the last 50 years. In the 1950s, the leading idea behind the European integration process, behind the integration, was to liberalize, to open up, to remove all kinds of barriers which existed at the borders of individual countries, to enable free movement of not only of goods and services, but also of people and ideas across the European continent. It was a positive concept and helped Europe significantly, even though it is difficult to express it quantitatively or to measure it. It changed radically during the 1980s, and the decisive breakthrough came with the Maastricht Treaty in December 1991. Political interest to unify Europe and to create a new superpower started to dominate. As a slogan, I would say integration had turned into unification, which is a totally different concept. Liberalization into centralization of decision-making, into harmonization of rules and legislation, into the strengthening of European institutions at the expense of institutions in the member states, into the enormous growth of democratic deficit in Europe, into post-democracy. Europe's constituting elements, the states, have been consistently, systematically, and to my great regret, successfully undermined. It was forgotten that the state is the only institution where real democracy is possible. You can't have democracy in empires. You can't have democracy in continents. You need a state to have a democracy. The Czech Republic, the EU member state since May 2004, wanted to reassume its place among European democracies, and the EU membership was the only way to show that the Czech Republic was accepted among the European democracy. There is no other method to do it in Europe these days. Nothing else legitimizes a country in Europe. We didn't want to stay aside, as we were forced to throughout the communist era. However, for those of us who spent most of their lives in the very authoritative, oppressive, and non-functioning communist regime, the undergoing weakening of democracy and of free markets on the European continent represents something we did not expect and we did not wish for in the moment of the fall of communism. We witnessed in Europe now a gradual shift from liberalizing and removing all kinds of barriers towards a massive introduction of regulation and harmonization from above, towards the ever-expanding, over-generous welfare system, towards new and more sophisticated forms of protectionism, towards the continuously growing legal and regulatory burdens on business, and so on. All that weakens and restrains freedom, democracy, and democratic accountability, not to speak about economic efficiency, entrepreneurship, and competitiveness.